Okay, perfect. Here we go. So today we are chatting about the story of early Estes Park by Enos Mills. Clearly the author can't be with us this morning, so I'll be leading the discussion. I have a couple of discussion questions to kind of get things rolling right away. So grab a drink, grab a snack, and we're going to jump right in. So first, I just kind of want to open things up for general thoughts or questions about the book. This is my first time reading it, but I know this book has been around for a while, so I'm sure many of you have already read it. Any thoughts that you want to share right away?
I have one.
Yeah, David.
The description of Isabella Bird climbing Long's Peak in this book is far more revealing than her description in her book. Basically, it wore her out. I found that interesting, hearing the narrative by somebody else.
It's funny to hear that same story from several different perspectives, isn't it?
Yes, she rode up, the others walked, at least to the boulder field.
Any other thoughts you want to share right away? Questions?
Well, I did like the thing at the end where Enos Mills was asking for people to not, please help about the litter and stuff. That was interesting, that even then it was an issue.
Yeah, the early start of leave no trace practices, right?
Yes.
So we all kind of know through this work, and then obviously others that we've encountered in book club, we kind of know of Enos Mills, the man, the myth, the legend. And we've done this before with authors, and I wanted to do it with him as well. What is one word that you would use to describe Mr. Mills? Don't everybody talk at once.
I would say tenacious.
It's not one word, but what I'm looking for, the one thing that I wrote down from this is that at some point, Esther, who actually wrote most of this book, says he didn't worry too much about the future. Like, it's so interesting to me that the person who wanted to preserve the park so much would be described as not caring that much about the future. He was just pretty much focused on what he did day to day and trying to make other people do the same things that he did day to day. And I hadn't thought about that for a long time. Enda used to kind of talk about that a little bit, that he just, his main thing was to try to keep other people interested in the things that he was interested in, which was the preservation of nature.
Yeah, that is interesting that, you know, his work has such a long-term impact, but he was really working for the day-to-day. That's an interesting point. Cindy, what did you, sorry, you started something?
I said tenacious.
Tenacious, yeah.
Is there any way you could get rid of this meeting being recorded is blocking the middle of the screen?
Oh, I'm not sure.
You can click it off.
Yeah, did you just say there's a thing that said got it, Vicky?
Yeah, got it. Click on got it and it'll go away.
Or whatever. It should go away.
Because I don't see that on my end, but it's probably because I'm doing the recording.
With what we've said so far about Enos, I would call him the one of the first ecologists.
Oh yeah, it's a great word. Anybody else? Descriptors of Enos Mills? I would say passionate.
I can't give one word.
Give me a couple then.
I just thought it was a thorough perspective from, early last century that I've didn't recognize, you know, that the places and things, names have changed, but it's still Estes Park.
I would say driven.
Driven, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, so many things he did was full throttle. There was no just a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, when he started something, he went for it, didn't he?
Michaela, I would say in the moment as well.
Yeah.
It's Lynn. And I think as we have progressed as human beings, sometimes we think we have more control over the future than we actually do. And I think in his time, it was so necessary to be focused in the present. I think we'd all do well doing that.
All right, fantastic. All right, well, those are good descriptors of Mr. Mills for sure. I wanted, because he was such a prolific writer, was this your first book that you had read, or first collection of works or essays that you had read by him? And if you've read some of his other work, how does this one compare?
It was my first.
Who's your first?
Was not my first, but I read it 30 years ago.
So it's,
I have the old copy from Inda that I got, at the little cabin on Highway 7, complete with a map. I don't know if you guys have this hand-drawn
Oh,
map.
no.
And
how
so I bought a bunch when I was in there, talking with Inda, but I had not read this in 30 years.
Well, I'm glad we were able to revisit.
Yeah, I've just read excerpts of some of his other writings.
Yeah, this was my first kind of full bound volume from him as well. But I had read excerpts and things like that. He's very lyrical.
Yes. I as well had read him earlier many years ago, but it is interesting to reread. It really is. Revisit. Yeah. And Dave, I think it was David who said his perspective on others, is pretty neat.
So in this particular book, was there a particular passage or description of anything that stuck with you or that stuck out to you? And if so, would you like to share it?
I really like that he had mentioned so many of these early settlers that we've heard about so much, and kind of brought them to life, all these names that we've heard and know, and places that we go to that are named after these Park and Sprague and Stead and all. Of course, we've heard about Rocky Mountain Jim and Isabella. I mean, you can't help but know quite a bit about them, but not so much. And so having a little bit of that fleshed out makes it even more interesting when you go to these places that are named after them or where they lived, the area. So I liked that. And I also liked the part in the back of the article that is written by Esther. That was very poetic and beautiful. And I really liked that a lot. And it was nice to have that included. And there was other thing at the end too, besides what was that one? The Tenderfoot's First Summer in the Rockies by Flora Stanley. That was very interesting as well. So I thought those were very nice inclusions in the book. And what fun to see these ads at the back of the different places that existed long ago. So I really enjoyed the book for just fleshing things out for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought it was interesting, since the book was written 1905 initially, that it is pre-F.O. Stanley. He's not in it, where today the hotel and F.O. Stanley is kind of a part of the origin of Estes Park, but yet this book doesn't focus at all on that because it didn't exist back then.
Well, we see FO show up later, right? Because he talks about the land purchase and
land
things like that.
purchase,
But you can see the jump in time for sure.
Yeah, it takes you right back to the beginning.
Yes. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share a particular passage or description? He has quite a description, particularly of the natural setting of Estes for sure.
He does. It's beautiful. That last paragraph on the back of the book is, I just want to read it every day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This here.
Yes, I'm curious. I thought maybe Curtis would be on.
Oh, Curtis Kelly?
Yes.
Oh,
I
he
thought
might.
maybe he'd be participating today.
Not today, but oftentimes.
Yes. Well, I've just seen him as Enos
Mm-hmm.
several times.
Yeah, kind of like Enos, he does a very good job of bringing these characters to life, right?
He does.
So at one point in the book, Mr. Mills describes Estes Park, which I really liked this description actually, as a fairyland for children. Why do you think he believes Estes Park, or kind of the natural surroundings, is such a great teacher or environment for young children?
It's Mother Nature.
Yeah, even today, just step outside your door and it's amazing. I mean, you never know what you're going to see. And it's wonderful to have kids, grandkids come up and you can point out little things that they're just not aware of. So it is a real opportunity to enlighten people, young and old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if that was after Enda was born. You know, I think this book was first written in 1905. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
But then it was updated in 1917 by Enos, and then put out again in 1924, which is after he died. So between 1917 and 1924 was when Enda was born, because there's not a lot in the history of the Estes Park, the Longspeak Inn, about anybody bringing their children. You know, my other favorite story is about the bluebird, you know, and how he didn't want to finish his cabin because the bluebirds were nesting in the top. And then there's that famous story about how he got so upset when the little boy shot the bluebird. So yeah, it's interesting that he didn't really seem to be that excited about children in his early years, but he did see the benefit of getting people young to be interested in Leave No Trace and doing whatever you could as best you could, climbing the mountains and all.
I have a question. If I was reading the right book,
Sure. Kim.
is it Early Estes Park?
Yep,
By
and there's
Enos Mills?
several kind of
Edition.
publications, versions, editions out there. So the one I have
Okay.
is the newer one and
Looks
it's
different.
blue, but Cindy has an older one and it's kind of pinkish. So it comes in many shapes and forms, but yep.
Okay, okay. It was interesting, very interesting. Like has been said.
Yeah, anybody else have thoughts on why he thinks outdoors, Estes Park maybe specifically, is such a great place for children?
They can play.
And they're our legacy. They're going to carry on in the future. So you have to know it to love it. So it's really good that they get outside and get to know it and learn to love it.
Yeah.
And care for it.
I would say endless exploring, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the next question. This was I really liked this particular passage because I felt like he spoke from experience. He notes that smaller hiking parties are best so you don't quarrel with your friends. And I know many of you here on this meeting are hikers. Do you agree that smaller parties are best? I mean, maybe not necessarily so you don't quarrel with your friends, but would you rather hike in a small group, a larger group, by yourself? He seemed to really like small groups, enough that he wrote about it anyway.
I agree with him. I don't know about the arguing thing, but
right.
It just becomes too much of a project, or, I just think if you keep it small and maybe even know a little bit about each person's idea of an ideal distance, or, some people don't want to stop. Some people like to take little breaks. I think it's just easier, smaller. That's just me. And I like to go by myself too. I'm a volunteer ranger assistant with Larimer County and Fort Collins. And so I oftentimes am by myself because I'm retired and I have younger friends who are still working. So it's fun by yourself too.
Yeah, for sure. He also says that the trail is a great place to make friends, right? There was the kind of flip side of that, or even fall in love, maybe. Maybe he was playing matchmaker. I was curious about that.
It is a great place to meet people, and unexpectedly on Christmas, I went up to Bear Lake snowshoeing and I was by myself, and I loved it. And about 3/4 of the way around the lake, which I've been to a zillion times, but it was snowing on Christmas and about 75-mile-an-hour winds. And sometimes you think, oh, for a moment, you wonder where you are. And I came upon a family from Germany about 3/4 of the way around. And I was thrilled. I felt like I ran into old friends and we visited, and it was neat. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, anybody else? Life on the trail, great place to make friends. Do you prefer?
I'd have to agree with him about the smaller size, because when I've been out hiking and you run across large groups, they're so busy chatting with each other, they can't really partake of the park. Where if it's just a small group, you're not really talking all the time. But these big groups are just constant chatter when you see them on a trail.
That is so true. I have noticed that too. I really have. Yeah. Because part of volunteering out on the trail is noticing people and, nodding, greeting, saying hello. And I've noticed that too. Large groups are just really busy visiting.
Also, the trails are narrow, so you can't really, you have to string out. You know, there's no way to walk side by side usually.
Which makes for choppy conversations
Yes.
when you're strung out.
Yeah, maybe sometimes the logistics of the big group is not the best on the trail.
And the big groups are noisy.
Some are, some aren't. Now, I led a big group last week and it was a pretty quiet group.
Oh,
But they're
interesting.
not all like that.
You led a group?
Yeah,
Oh, may I ask, with whom? What?
that was with trail trekkers.
Oh, neat.
I usually, I like to lead a smaller group, somewhere between 4 and 6 is my optimum.
Mm.
But sometimes that it mushrooms a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good for you. That's great.
So would you agree then, I think maybe with Enos, that like smaller groups are a little bit easier?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
Although our big group was pretty good. We went to Hidden Falls in Wild Basin the day after Wild Basin Road reopened. And amazingly, there was a pretty good trail all the way to the falls. And we had a great time there. A lot of us hiked up to right below the falls. And we came back. And as we were leaving the winter parking, we all were kind of strung out in our different cars. And when we got to the almost to the entrance, everybody stopped right by Copeland Lake. And I wondered, well, what's going on? There was a car stuck just before Copeland Lake in the road, and none of us could get out. So everybody piled out of their cars, and our group helped that young man get his car unstuck. And it took 4 tries before they could move that car after shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. So the big group was very helpful.
Very good.
So
Yeah.
that was good because we needed all that manpower.
Yeah, clearly the resources of the big group came in handy for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't usually happen that way, but it did Friday.
Well, I'm glad everybody got out of the parking lot.
We all got out.
I think my husband and I have found if we're hiking for our own pleasure, we prefer a predictable group of people that we know their speed, their pace, how much they want to talk and not talk, if they're willing to stop and look at other things. But it is always fun when people are new and you're taking them for the first time, and maybe it's a bigger group than you like, to show people, to take people that are unfamiliar.
That was right on Friday because out of 14 of us, I think there were 6 who had never been there. And they were thrilled.
Oh, God. What was the distance of the hike?
Round trip was only 4 miles.
Is that round trip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not much elevation gain. Maybe.
For summer people only, we don't know about Hidden Falls. You have to be here in the winter to know about that.
That's right, because it doesn't exist in the summer.
That's correct.
Oh.
But it's fabulous. It's a big secret. It's beautiful.
It is gorgeous. We saw an ice climber.
That's fun. So clearly the dynamics of a hiking group really shape the hike, right?
They do. Trail Trekker group is a pretty nice bunch of people.
Fantastic. All right. So in book club, again, many of you are return members, and we've read. And David mentioned this earlier already, so he's jumped my question. But we kind of get the same story, right, of Isabella Bird on Long's Peak from a different perspective. So how would you compare Enos Mills' writing style and subsequently his story of her climbing Long's Peak to her account?
Well, I guess I found that part the most interesting. And one of the things that I liked was before it even started, when he was recounting the story of two men in Longmont at the hotel who were asked to take her, and they had in mind, they didn't want to do it, of course, but then they had in mind what she might look like. And then she came out the next morning, and I can't remember how they said it, but she was not our fantasy. But a couple other things about the hike itself, that I guess it was a third person telling him, where they split up and some people took a shorter route and they had to keep waiting for her. And I was just trying to figure out, for you other people who've been up longs, what they were talking about. And I think he was talking about the backside near the trough, when you leave the trough and you go to the keyhole, that somehow I think they were describing that Jim and Isabella took what I would say is the current lower trail, where you go down quite a bit and you come back up, and that these guys took a higher, shorter trail. I wasn't sure what they were talking about.
Yeah, anybody familiar with Longs? I am unfamiliar with the current route. So did you
I
guys
agree with
know?
it. It's not clear to me what they meant by the lower route versus the higher route, because having been there, I only know of one route. Go through the keyhole and turn left. But-
Maybe at the time there were two different routes, and they've just, the Park Service has reduced it where there's one.
There are different routes beyond the keyhole. My husband Daryl has done several others. There's one that's sort of goes up through a chimney, and it is higher than the regular ledges and so on. But it's not done very often.
Her description of her going up in her book is sort of vanilla.
Yeah.
The fellow that wrote the paragraph, I forgot his name, but it wasn't Jim, but he was very descriptive. I guess he used the word she was shot or spent, when had a helper back on the donkey by the time they got back to the boulder field. And she doesn't mention being all that exhausted in her book.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't she say he had to he had to holler up the dog jump,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a sack of
Yeah.
potatoes or something? So
Yeah.
that she wasn't actually too gung ho to try to get up that. Plus, you have to remember that she was a lot shorter, which I think was the hardest part. When the time that I climbed Longs, we went up the cable route and came down through the trough and the ledges. So I can't really say if maybe they went around that way too, at one of the points. Of course, that would have been before the cables were there.
And you have to think about her footwear. I mean, I would imagine there's no tread, nothing to hold you on. I would think it would be a smooth soled boot she had on.
Right, like a riding boot, a cowboy boot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I
quite
just-
possibly in a dress with layers underneath, but a dress nonetheless.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, her bloomer suit, I think. So, she had those kind of panty things.
Yeah, those guys down in Longmont mentioned that she rode a horse up like a cowboy, which made me think maybe she had pants.
Yeah, I think she had trousers of some sort.
Yeah, she cheated. The other three had a walk. She rode to the boulder field.
That was a common way to go up
Mhm.
Longs at that time, to ride horses up to the boulder field.
Yeah.
Yeah, up into the 50s, people rode horses up there. So,
Oh,
you
did they
know.
really? Huh.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a friend tell me that it was very common to have a horse all summer if you were up here, maybe not at Long's Peak, but that to have a horse all summer was like $3 a week. And their mom got them the horses, and that's all they saw on the trail were people on horses. And then when horses got rarer and more expensive and more people started coming, then they started hiking more.
And this was in the 50s? In the 50s, you saw more horses?
Yeah, in the 50s and even into the 60s, I think. They're, you know, we're just not used to riding, like Enda grew up more riding horses than hiking. She did climb some things with her mother, but they mostly rode horses all around as far up as they could go to anywhere. So
I
that,
find
you
the
know, there's
horse
that
trails.
Cowboy Brad song about how everybody looks at him now with his hat and boots and wonders about his roots, because most of us are into hiking boots, or even like mountain bikes now are getting a little bit more popular, though they're not so much in the park.
Right. That's a really interesting point. I'm thinking back to the 60s, and I think a light bulb went on with this conversation. I think I remember seeing more horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I don't hike so much, but I do enjoy doing the horseback rides every once in a while. And thought about it at Christmas because they're open in the winter, one of them.
Oh, what's
But
your
I'm
favorite?
not,
What's your
Um,
favorite?
I think it's the Gateway. The Elkhorn Lodge, I think it's called, it isn't open anymore. But the one, the Gateway, I think it's called, the when you go off the Wonder View entrance, it's right near the park. So it goes into the park.
The north entrance is right by the ranger
Trail,
station and the little store.
yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks like a good one.
It is. And you can do different lengths. I haven't done different lengths, but you can. And
And
you
they're
can
open
go,
in the winter.
and that one I don't think is open in the winter.
Oh,
The one
okay.
that, I think the one that was at Elkhorn is now over by where Enos Mills cabin was. And I'm trying to think of the Dow place.
Dow House.
Yes. And I
or
haven't
formerly
done it, but
Aspen Lodge.
that's the one that's open in the winter. I haven't done that yet though, but
They don't go into the park.
no, they used to. I think they were at Elkhorn Lodge. But which is no more. So, but yeah, they're open in the winter.
Yeah, so maybe we need to get back to horses. It sounds like a great way to
Yeah.
explore, or at least a different way to explore, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not a big hiker, but
For sure. So kind of on the same vein, there's a story about that he recounts about the group going up and over Flat Top in what sounds like a very scary blizzard. So that's quite a harrowing story. Do you think the folks in it, I'm thinking of the Spragues, clearly knew kind of, you know, they were certainly familiar with the area. Do you think that was something kind of foolish that they did? Do you think it was adventurous? What did you make of that particular story?
I think they should have
It
paid
was
attention to the
unexpected.
weather report.
Yeah,
I thought it was
think got
unexpected.
them. Yeah.
I thought it was exciting.
Exciting, unexpected. Sorry, Sybil, did you have something
No,
as well?
they just didn't have that kind of weather report. You looked outside and went, oh, it appears to be cloudy on the peaks. I guess we won't go today. You know, though I did in that story, I read this a little bit too long ago. I think it was like there were 5 of them and it said 2 or 3 of them were experienced. And I was trying to think if that meant it was the Spragues, because it was Abner and Alberta, right, was with him. And somebody else that, like any other tourist today, when you're the host and they go, well, we're only here for 2 days and we need to go over to Flat Top. Can't we go today? And the guide says, well, no, because it's going to snow 8 feet or whatever. that's the part of that story that cracked me up. It's like, we have to go today. And even Isabella had that. I have to go now. I'm only in the United States for a certain amount of time. And if I don't go today, I'll never get a chance to go again, which is why there are a lot of fatalities in various places.
Yes,
People think I
that's
have
so
to do it
true.
now.
That's so true.
My memory with that story was it was 2 days, and the first day was just fine, and they camped. And then they started out and got into trouble, but that was really, really serious trouble they were in
Yeah.
with no gear. I can't imagine. And I was trying to visualize the shelf they said they were lowering themselves down on. And
I can appreciate what they did, because several years ago we were hiking on that trail, but from this side though, and it started snowing, and we got to the point where you can't even follow your tracks back. You can't. It's hard to find the trail. We turned around quickly, and were able to follow our tracks back for the most part. But if you get out there, and the snow covers the trail, there's no way except looking for markers, to get your way. That's scary.
Yeah, and the weather changes fast, right? That's
Yeah, it
kind of-
did. It wasn't snowing when we started our hike, and then it snowed.
Well, and that's kind of in their account, they had started and then it started snowing even worse. So then they had to turn back like just a few minutes later. So yeah, it sounds like the weather changes quickly.
It was interesting. That was the trail we were on too, the flat top trail.
Yeah. Once you get above timberline, it's hard to tell where you are some of the time.
yeah. And in a whiteout. And didn't they say they were fumbling around and then they realized they were at the edge of a cliff, and then that's when they turned around
Yeah.
and went back to that shelf that they'd been on?
Yeah, to kind of wait out the weather, right? So they could see better,
Yeah, or not walk off a cliff.
right? No thanks. No thanks. And then I didn't even think of this, but he kept saying there was no fire, there was no fire. It's like, why didn't they build a fire? Is like you guys have pointed out already, they were above tree line. What were they gonna build a fire with?
Yeah.
A lot of rocks up there though.
A lot of rocks. You can't build a fire with those though, right? Speaking of kind of the change in weather, Enos kind of has this plea almost to encourage people to stay later and later in the season, particularly into the fall, and not have people run away, as soon as the weather turns just a little bit cool. What is your favorite season up here? Like we're just talking about, weather changes fast, the seasons change fast. What is your favorite season up here in the mountains and why?
September.
September.
I would agree.
Just beautiful.
I agree.
Nice.
September, just like specifically the month of
Yeah.
September. Yeah.
When you're only here in the summer, you don't know. And so you have to come in the fall sometime, and then you're hooked.
What makes September the best?
The foliage, the colors,
Colors.
and the kids are back in school.
It's quiet.
Yes. Temperature.
And the snow has melted up high, so you can get just about anywhere. You can
Yes.
do it.
Before it moves back in, right?
It's a really nice time to hike.
What's interesting is about every 3 days, if you go in the park, the same place, the colors change, and the colors change, and what's green and what's not green changes almost daily, and it's fascinating to go in like every couple of days on the same road or the same path.
Interesting.
Well, that's true even in the spring when the flowers start coming out. There's always new flowers blooming.
most brilliant part this past year was the road to Bear Lake. As you come up upon the Bierstadt hillside, that hillside was just magnificent this year.
It was the best I've ever seen it. It was a lot more brilliant orange in this last fall.
September is definitely the best time. Spring's nice, but you know, the flowers don't all come out at the same elevation.
That's right.
I like winter too.
Kim, what's your favorite part about winter up here?
I guess I like the snow, as long as you can get around.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. But yeah, just so pretty.
Wife and I like hiking Trail Ridge Road past the Many Parks parking lot where it's closed. Because normally you just drive through there and you don't ever take it in. But if you go hiking, you know, past the roadblock, it's fascinating to just listen to the little noises and the quietness of it all in the snow. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite places to cross country ski. And you're right, David. It's really interesting because usually you're in a car going, 30 miles an hour, but it's nice to
35 miles an hour.
experience it slower.
Yeah.
I think as time goes on, I'm finding myself loving each and every opportunity that I have to go up even more, even regardless of the season. I mean, we're so lucky we can be so well prepared, unlike Isabella with her skirts and boots. And if we're fortunate enough to have the gear, and gosh, you can just have the best time at almost any time of the year. Like I mentioned on Christmas, that was just so wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of to talk about, to go back a little bit, I guess, David mentioned that he really starts at the beginning, right? Some of those earliest pioneers before Mr. Stanley and before, things really got going. Why do you think, this struck me as I was reading, so let me know if I'm alone in this, but why do you think many of the hardships, like we hear Flora Stanley's account, where she sounds pretty miserable, right? Like she's cold, they're just piling things on top of themselves to stay as warm as they can. Why do you think that almost every one of these stories I've noticed ends with them then recounting the good old days, right? They describe these brutal winters, these scary adventures, the kind of struggle that they're having as early pioneers in the area. Why do you think they have such fond memories of these hardships?
That thrill of survival. Oh, sorry, David. Just that thrill that you made it. It's rewarding.
David?
Well, I can't imagine how they roughed it because, they didn't have flush toilets and running water. And I've used outhouses in the winter. not at zero like, a lot of these stories talk about how cold it was back then. But just the ability to eat and cook and keep warm. I don't, it just amazes me that these people survived and they stayed.
Yeah, and why do you think they talked about these struggles so fondly?
Well, I think one lady mentioned already, they survived it. It's like climbing a mountain, you do it because it's there, and when they're done, you can say, I did it. So they survived the winter in Estes Park. We're surviving in a winter, but not the same way.
Yeah, our hardships aren't quite the same, are they? Or our experiences, right? Anybody else? Why do you think these struggles, I guess, were remembered so fondly? Do you have memories like this where maybe you're on a very strenuous hike and at the time you're miserable and you're cold and your feet hurt, you can't wait to get back to the car, and then in the retelling you find yourself, oh, the flowers were so beautiful and I was so glad I was out. And do you find yourself doing the same thing?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's always good to finish and look back and say, yeah, I did it. You know, the pain goes away. Warm car.
Yeah, anybody else? Why we have such fond memories of the struggles?
I do have a question, Michaela.
The camaraderie, the people,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
good time that you're with and all of that, it comes bigger in your mind than the hardship of how cold you were.
Sure. The community building, I mean, that's one way to do it, right? Struggle together.
So when are you going to go up to Longs Peak?
Me?
Yeah.
You know what? There are so many ways to be outside, David. I think Longs and I are great from a distance.
That's
I can't go anymore. I would.
I mean, you guys, I know many of you here have been up at, I know several people who have been, but maybe not for me. I don't know. I haven't quite made up my mind about it yet.
My first and only trip, I was 49 years old. You're not even near that.
No, see, I've got plenty of time to figure it out.
You got a lot of time.
No. Last summer, we had quite an exciting event because our son from Grand Rapids and his son, oldest son, who is almost 15, came out in August to climb Longs Peak with their grandpa. And the three of them went, and their picture was in the paper.
yeah, I saw that. I
Three
saw that.
generation climb.
Yeah.
3 generations.
Daryl, Tim, and Ben all made it up there together. And Daryl, he's climbed Longs a lot because he worked at as a volunteer at the trailhead there. And
Yes.
he's climbed it a lot. I think that was his 38th or 39th time. He might do it once more yet, maybe, but he found it a little harder than the time before, but it had been 2 years since he'd been up there. And I think, or maybe even 3. And he took me up once. The summer I was 70, he took me up. And I made it to the top, but it took us 2 days because
Wow.
we stayed overnight in the boulder field. Not a very good night's sleep, but a very exciting night. But I loved it. I really loved getting up there. And if I could do it then, you can do it.
What time of year was it?
August 2nd.
Okay.
It was a good time. We did have some rain that night. Just a little bit scary being up in the boulder field. But it wasn't too severe and not much lightning, thank goodness. So we were okay. But getting up to the top was very exciting. And I know that my grandson really, really liked it this summer. And my son, that was his second time, and he loved it too. So it can be done. But you need to acclimate and you need to practice and do, flat top or Twin Sisters and so on, or maybe even Chapin Chiquita Ypsilon to kind of get yourself going before you attempt it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I know enough that training would have to be involved, right?
Yes,
What do you think it is about Longs Peak? I mean, Enos was such a fan. He summited so many times. Isabella Bird writes about her. I mean, several people write about Isabella Bird's summit to Longs Peak. We've had other authors.
It's one of the harder 14ers in the whole state. Not the hardest, but one of the harder ones. And Daryl did it. It was his first 14er. And because of coming out here in the summer times. before we moved here. He climbed it in 94 the first time, I think it was. But it draws you. It draws you because it's most northern 14er, farthest on the Front Range, the only one in a national park. So it's special.
What?
I've been on a few others and there's none quite as exciting as Long's, for me anyway, of the few that I've been on. But I really am glad, since I see it out my window every morning, every day. Well, not today. It's kind of hidden today. I'm glad I could say I was up there looking down.
Yeah, that's something to say, right? Like, if seeing that mountain every day, being
Yeah.
able to say you were on top of it. Yeah.
Remember how hard it was. Like you said, something hard.
Yeah, going back. Yeah.
Right.
The fondness for the struggle or the difficulty or something, right?
It is.
All right, so I've just got a couple more questions. We might be done a little early, but that's okay. So we talked about that there's a small section in here written by Flora Stanley. And she has this passage that I would like to read and then get your thoughts on. She writes, "The solemn brooding of the mountains and the stream and the sternness of the hills seem to influence the character of those who have lived continuously amid these impressive surroundings. How do you think these impressive surroundings shape the people who live here?" Did I stump you? I'll let it marinate for a little bit, but that was from Flora Stanley's passage, kind of near the end of the book, when she's recounting her time here. Yeah, a tenderfoot's first summer in the Rockies, like we had mentioned before. Anybody thoughts?
That's not in my copy.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, Cindy, I took you by surprise.
And somebody talked about ads in the back. That's not in my copy either.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I
Okay,
have
well,
the bonus. I have the bonus map, but I don't have those other things.
okay.
The interesting thing to me about the Flora Stanley part is that she was pretty much blind. So, you know, her experience of Estes Park was what people told her about the fabulous view from the Stanley or climbing Long's Peak, or the people that suffered through the whole winter. You know, they went back to Maine, which is not exactly warm winter either. Not like they went to Florida for the winter.
Right.
You know, there's just some kind of whole, there's something about mountains for a lot of people that just draw you to the mountains. You want to be in the mountains. And I think it was even more so for those early people. They didn't want to live in the city. They wanted somehow to figure out how to live on their own in a place that they loved, that was interesting to them. I think that's mainly what Enos and a lot of the other people who were here early felt about this place.
Do you think that still kind of applies today, Sybil, for folks?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it applies to for a lot of people. But there are a lot more people, it seems, who aren't here year round, or, you know, they come here in the summer and think, oh, this is the most fabulous place in the world. And then in November, when the wind blows, they go, oh, wait, maybe we don't want to live here after all. And it's so much easier now. None of us really have to struggle like any of those early pioneers had to struggle just to find food or shelter or heat, whatever. So, but there's still some kind of attraction here for a lot of people. And I think that really came out during the pandemic, like lots, you know, that's why there's so many more people coming to the park now. because they think they're going to find something in the wilderness that they don't have in their living room.
They do find it. They do find it. I volunteer up at Bear Lake, and boy, people who come up there, even if they only go to Bear Lake, they come off of the lake and come back. Maybe they've just gone around it part way and not even all the way around it. And they're so excited about the beauty and being there and experiencing it, that it does mean a lot, even if it's very transitory. I love the fact that for me, it's permanent. I can go anytime and live right here and experience it all the time. But that's what drew us here from Michigan in retirement. Those mountains, they just kept calling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're a pretty lucky group, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah, any
Rocky Mountains have a different style and look about them, as different from the Alps and Yosemite and such. So it's got its own style, I guess, is one that, Rocky Mountain National Park has its own look that you don't get in other places. I've seen the Alps enough, and it's completely different kind of rock structure. But it is a unique experience. And I live here now, so I can enjoy it. Next question.
Okay, well, I will let anybody, do you have any other final thoughts on that particular passage? Do you want me to read it again? Or at least she says, the solemn brooding of the mountains and the sternness of the hills seem to influence the characters of those who have lived continuously amid the impressive surroundings. Any other final thoughts on that packet?
I don't think this relates to Flora, but I first started coming 50 years ago, and and thanks to Enos, when you actually get into the park and up the trail a ways, it's just the same as it was 50 years ago and 80 and 90.
Mhm.
When I hear great stories from my grandmother, and so, since I was 19 when I started coming, I feel 19 again when I get, up the trail ways. If I go too far, I know I'm not 19 anymore, but
Well said. That's so true.
Mhm.
We need that, don't we? We need that.
My wife and I've had recently is, where else would we want to live permanently? And we can't think of another place that we would rather live permanently. We've been around a lot. It's just a perfect place to live, scenery wise, and now all the facilities that are available. You can always go down the hill.
Yeah.
If you want.
And not by stagecoach, right? All right, guys. So any other final thoughts or questions on the book? Anything that struck you that you haven't shared yet while reading?
On this edition, there was that nice little thing at the end too, a little history of Grand Lake area. I thought that was really nice too,
Mhm.
as we forget we have that.
Yeah, our sister on the other side of the divide, right?
Right. That now is divided farther away than in the summer.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm not going over Flat Top in the winter. No way.
No.
And we just read about why, right? Yeah, I really like that section on Grand Lake. I'm not as familiar with their history as I am with Estes Park, obviously, but it was great to read some of those kind of early stories. And how it differed really from Estes Park in those
Yeah.
early days. So I thought that was very interesting as well.
It's
Anybody
still-
else?
What's fun is in the summer, I work up at Alpine Visitor Center. And so I know a lot about the west side of the park as well as the east. And that's really good there a lot to become familiar with the other side of the park and find out what's different and what's delightful and to help people. And I'm often encouraging people who say, well, I think I'll turn around and go back to Estes. I said, well, what are you going to do the rest of the day? Oh, I don't know, shop downtown. I said, how about going over to Grand Lake? And I really tell them all the neat things that they can see on the west side on the way and all the moose that they might encounter. And then and tell them about the charm of Grand Lake, because that village is quite a lot different than Estes Park, even now, even it is still different and charming in its own way. And a lot of people will go and then they might even stop in later and say, oh, I'm so glad you told me to go over there. So, or suggested that, that would be a good thing to do. They might have just one day or two out on Trail Ridge Road. Well, don't give up yet. There's more.
Mhm.
I like that part of the park too.
Yeah, absolutely. Each side kind of has its own character almost.
It does.
For sure. All right. Anybody else? Final thoughts, questions, impressions?
Has anyone been to Grand Lake in the winter?
Sorry, David,
Has
did you
anyone-
say, has anybody been to Grand Lake in the winter?
Yeah, I mean, once Trail Ridge closes.
Oh yeah, it's a long drive, but it's worth it, especially if you stay overnight a couple nights. It's beautiful on that side. Great cross-country skiing over there. And hiking, and you can have a really good time.
We measured to go around this summer. It's 140 miles to go around.
Yeah,
It's only 50
Yeah.
miles to go over the top.
right. Mhm.
All right, guys. Well, we'll wrap up here a little bit early. But I just want to know, well, thank you all for being here, coming back to Zoom. Thanks again. We had to pivot a little bit, but we'll continue with Zoom. I heard from a lot of folks who said this would be a lot easier for them, especially with book club being in the winter. Even if COVID numbers go down, the roads are always kind of questionable. So we'll stay on Zoom for the time being. So check our Facebook page and our website for future Zoom links and things like that. Clearly, you guys already know where to find them. Our February read is going to be the Images of America series, Estes Park by our very own Sybil Barnes.
Woohoo.
Woo.
Wow.
So Sybil will be joining us as an author next month. So we have copies of this here at the museum. I'm sure you can get it at the library, wherever books are sold in town. And our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 16th, right back here from the comfort of your living room, 10 a.m. And if you guys have any questions, of course, between now and then, just shoot me an email. You guys know where to find me. My website or my email address is on the museum website, and you can get a hold of us through the Facebook page as well. So yep, the Images of America series right here, Estes Park, and Sybil will be joining us. I will say we will pick titles for March and April at that meeting as well. So kind of in the meantime, be thinking of books you want to read. And bring some suggestions. I already have some written down, but if you stumble across anything in the meantime, make a note, and we'll pick our last two reads for March and April at the February meeting. So that's kind of all book club. Museum announcements. Like I said, the museum gallery is open. We are open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. And if you have any questions, let me know. And with that, I think we'll call it a morning.
Thank you.
Thank you all so
Yes,
much
thank
for
you.
joining
Thanks so
us.
much.
This was great. Good to see you all again.
Thank you. You are so
And-
wonderful. You do such a
Thank you.
good job.
And
Good
we'll
book
see.
and a good
Thank
group.
It was a good
Thank
one to
you.
start on, wasn't it? All right. Well, we'll see
Yes.
you next time, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.